So good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining, and welcome to today's seminar uh, in the CIB W120 Disasters and the Built Environment. My name is Krisanti Seniviratna, and I'm delighted to host this session as a CIB W120 Commission Coordinator. With the support, of course, of Yashoda Kalutotage, our Commission's Coordinator. Today's seminar is titled Climate Resilience, Building Back Not Better, Smarter. This topic feels especially timely as we witness the devastating impact of Cyclone Gabrielle, which has recently battered Sri Lanka and is bringing torrential rains and flooding to parts of Tamil Nadu and Puducherry. Here's today's agenda. We'll begin with an acknowledgement of the country, followed by an introduction of our speakers from BRANZ. After their presentation, we'll open the floor for questions and answers. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat during the presentation. And once the presentation is over, you can unmute and ask your questions. And finally, I'll share the updates on upcoming events before we conclude the session. Okay, so as a tradition, let me acknowledge the country. I acknowledge the Baramadical people of the Derek Nation, traditional custodians of the lands within our footprint areas. I also acknowledge that many of you are joining us from different lands across Australia and beyond. I pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We recognize that First Nations sovereignty was never ceded. This land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Against this backdrop, we are honored to have Dr. Catherine Nicholson and Dr. Katy Stokes from the Building Research Association of New Zealand, BRANZ, as our speakers. Dr. Catherine Nicholson is a senior materials scientist at BRANZ, and much of her work over the past 10 years has involved assessing the long-term performance and durability of new materials and building components that may have had only limited use in New Zealand. Catherine's research has more recently switched to focus on building resilience to minimize the risk associated with natural hazards and climate change. Well fits with our commission. She now co-leads the Climate Resilience Project with Dr. Katy Stokes. Dr. Katy Stokes, also a senior materials scientist at BRANZ. Her research experience includes timber durability and investigating the impact of flooding on the building system. Further areas of interest include non-destructive detection of mold byproducts and chemical contaminants. Katy actively contributes to New Zealand and Australian standards and technical panels. She focuses on resilience as a co-lead with Dr. Catherine Nicholson, working towards reducing the impact of natural hazards on building through retrofit and smarter design. So in this session, they will introduce BRANZ to our W120 community, showcase their ongoing and past research, and discuss any opportunities for collaboration with our commission. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Nicholson and Dr. Stokes. Catherine and Katy, the floor is yours. So let me stop sharing so that you can share your slides. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you. So so I'm Catherine Nicholson, and I will just start off by giving you a little bit of an introduction, a bit of an overview to our research organisation, BRANZ, the Building Research Association of New Zealand, and then a little bit on some of the work we've done in the past that's relevant to this working group, and then I'll hand over to Katy to go into a little bit more on our current research in climate resilience. So we are a team of scientists and engineers. We have a number of labs and testing facilities at our site, and as well as testing labs, we also have exposure sites out around the country and elsewhere where we can take our research out into the field. And then we also have a number of experimental buildings and houses. So we've got quite a wide range of things that we can do in terms of testing and research. And these numbers are from a couple of years ago, but it'll give you a bit of an idea of our size and the amount of research funding that we have and how many research projects we do. So we are located at near the bottom of the North Island of New Zealand, just north of the capital, Wellington. And people are always quite surprised about where we are. We are very much in a rural locality, as you can see. We're not sort of in the middle of an industrial estate where you might expect a decent sized research facility to be. So we have this lovely location here. And we very much enjoy the rural location. So a key point about BRANZ is that we are an independent research association, and we pride ourselves on being trusted, as well as bringing that independence to our research and testing. And our aim is to deliver practical research, testing, assurance, and expertise to improve New Zealanders' lives. So we do this in three main ways. Firstly, through practical research, which is what Katy and I are involved with in our roles, and our work is obviously very applied. It needs to be fit for purpose in terms of being useful for the building and construction industry. Secondly, we invest our building research levy into those research projects. So our funding comes from this levy, which benefits the whole sector, the whole building and construction sector in New Zealand. So that levy works in that 0.1% of the value of building work over 20,000 New Zealand dollars is that levy comes into BRANZ and then is allocated out to funding research projects, which then benefit the industry. So that's where our research funding comes from. And then the other thing that we offer is independent evidence-based testing and assurance services, which we provide commercially. So as well as our research side, we have this commercial testing of products and services. So just to give you a bit of an idea of the facilities that we have, this is one of the most exciting projects we've had recently, and that's a new fire lab that was built. It's still being commissioned. It's not too far away now from offering services, but it's absolutely huge. If I just give you some data here, it's the size of 5 netball courts, and the roof is 22.5 22 meters high. We can test full-scale, multi-story fire scenarios and run multiple tests. So this has given us much bigger scope to be able to expand our fire testing capability. We also have a fairly new structural engineering lab. And again, we can test pretty large structures, buildings up to 3 stories high. We test for earthquakes, wind loading, snow loading, gravity, all sorts of things, both structural and non-structural testing. So we can also do ceilings, claddings, mechanical systems, quite a wide range. And then coming on to the materials lab, which is really where Katy and I sit more. So New Zealand is quite unique in terms of our building code in that we have performance requirements for durability. So depending on the particular component, that durability requirement may be 5, 15 or 50 years. And so we have quite a lot of testing related to that to ensure that our products are really going to stand the test of time. So we've got a wide range of tests available from UV testing, corrosion, weather tightness, the whole works. So recently we had a strategy refresh, and we have now got 4 main focus areas for our research, which are around affordability, quality, resilience, and sustainability. And our work that we're going to talk about tonight is very much focused on resilience, obviously. But just to give you a very brief overview of the other 3, affordability is about finding practical solutions for buildings that are affordable to build, maintain, and live in. Quality is about ensuring buildings are safe, healthy, and ready for the future. And our sustainability focus is around working together to create cost-effective, environmentally friendly building solutions. So we'll get on to resilience in a moment, but basically that's around future-proofing New Zealand's buildings to protect people from earthquake, fire, extreme weather, and climate change. And Katy will talk a little bit more about that shortly. So just to link in what we've done in the past and what we're doing currently around resilience, we just thought it would be useful to just bring up our definitions of these at the moment. So when we're thinking about resilience, we're thinking about that ability to withstand and recover rapidly from the many disruptive events that we've seen recently, and we know that we're going to continue to see. Whereas durability is more around that resistance to wear and decay, and that's what I mentioned before in terms of our New Zealand building code. We have an actual building code clause focused specifically on durability. So what we're obviously they're both linked quite closely, but this resilience is really moving forward from the performance that we expect to have for our expected weather conditions to what we can do to build to anticipate what we're going to be getting in the future and to really improve the resilience of our current and future buildings and to be able to retrofit more resiliently as well. So in our durability research to date, we've made quite extensive use of exposure sites all around the country. We've got 25 of them, extending all the way from up in the north right down to the south. And that really encompasses the large variations in climate that we have here in New Zealand. And it also extends from the inland areas right out to the most corrosive coastal areas around the country as well. One of the unique things about New Zealand is that we have quite a lot of people who live in or very close to geothermal hotspots, which isn't really found elsewhere that much in the world. So we've done quite a lot of research in this area as well, and it's very interesting to see really the very, very high rates of corrosion in these areas. So as well as all our other natural hazards, we've got this to contend with in New Zealand as well. And one other aspect of research that we've done recently is looking at corrosion in the Chatham Islands. And that's also been really interesting because the corrosion levels out here are pretty much off the charts, really quite unprecedented corrosion rates here. And you know, we think that this is potentially a sentinel for what could happen with climate change in the future. So this is possibly a look, you know, a bit of a window into what could happen in mainland New Zealand in the future. If you want to know a little bit more about this research, I'll just give a little plug to our researcher, our colleague Chengwei Li, who will be presenting on this work, and also Katy, who will be presenting on her timber durability work at the DBMC conference in Montreal next year. So if you want to know more about these projects, tune in there. But this really leads on to what we're doing now in terms of our climate resilience project, climate resilience building back smarter. So I will hand over to Katy at this point and let her tell you a little bit more about what we're doing.
Okay, so I will share my screen and hopefully technology will be on my side. Is it working? Everyone see it?
It's all good, Katy. Go on.
Awesome. So you probably noticed that we had sort of the climate resilience building back better. What we found in the really early stages of this project was that actually for some people was quite triggering. And so after some conversations, we actually got the conversation that building back smarter was actually a little bit more palatable and made a lot more sense for people when we started discussing that kind of topic with them. What I'll do is just firstly talk a little bit just about natural hazards. For those who don't know, New Zealand is one of the most hazard-prone countries in the world. We sit on the Ring of Fire, so we're obviously quite prone to volcanic and earthquake events. There's been a whole bunch of research, especially in the earthquake space. There are some suspicions that in the next 50 years, we're likely to experience a magnitude 8 earthquake down the Southern Alps of New Zealand, which is in South Island. We've got a 50% chance of a quake sequence similar to those that were in Napier and Wellington, sort of early 1931 and 1940s. Almost 100% chance of a central North Island volcanic eruption. Ruapehu is very, very active, but we also have a 1 in 20 chance of a volcanic eruption in Auckland, which surprises a lot of people. You don't really get earthquakes up there, but they do have a lot of volcanoes, and the city is actually built on top of some of them. And then, of course, we have tsunami. We have subduction zones off to the east coast of the North Island, which are constantly moving. So it's certainly a high risk down that side of the coast of the North Island. But then, of course, we have climate change, and we're starting to see that those sort of long-term underlying trends are showing an increase in the intensity of what we're experiencing and also the frequency from weather-related events. And we know it's going to increase. We're already seeing it. So you'll see in this image, this has actually just recently come out of Earth Sciences New Zealand, out of some funding that they had to look at flooding across New Zealand to try and basically build an all of New Zealand flood risk model. And if you look at it, the numbers are quite stark. With our current population, there's around 750,000 people at risk of flooding from a 1 in 100-year event. When you look at the value of the buildings that actually exist in that space, that's $235 billion worth of value in our buildings alone. If we start seeing the temperatures increase further, that gets up to sort of much closer to 300 billion. And then, of course, we've got all our roads, stormwater pipelines, and electricity as well. One of the things that really kicked this project off was in 2023, we had the Auckland anniversary flooding events. There probably wasn't as much warning as people might have hoped. And that was followed up several weeks later with the tail end of Cyclone Gabrielle, which hit both Auckland and down the east coast of the North Island as well. The estimated combined asset cost for those two events was between $9 and $14.5 billion, which is a fairly significant cost, and especially given it was the biggest city that we've got in the country as well that was hit by it. What that did mean, though, is it kind of provided the impetus and a bit of that pressure that justified us putting forward our project, looking at climate resilience and building back better. So the project actually started in April 2024. Obviously, we had quite a bit of time to actually talk to stakeholders. So that included our councils, some of the universities and research organisations, reaching into the insurance sector as well, and also government. So we have the Natural Hazards Commission in New Zealand, Takatuaki, who used to be EQC, who were the Earthquake Commission. More recently, they obviously rebranded, and because they do look at a wider range of hazards than just earthquake. And also MB, who are our Ministry for Business, Innovation, and I've lost the E. But basically,
employment.
Yeah, employment. So what we really wanted to do with this project before we jumped into doing any kind of experimental work was really get an idea about what was happening, not only in New Zealand, but also internationally. We know we're not unique. All you have to do is turn on the news and we can see what's happening, obviously, in Sri Lanka. We saw similar things happening up in Europe. We saw the floods in Texas. It's happening everywhere. So we were fairly sure that there were probably already potentially some solutions out there that we could bring into New Zealand that would fit within our building code. And then we're not wasting our time sort of redoing research that's already done. So basically within the project, the idea was that we split into two streams to try and take a bit more of a holistic approach. So Catherine and I are obviously material scientists. We're much more on the technical side. So we sit within stream one, which is looking at the recovery side of things, questioning that do we build as before? Do we build back better? Do we take the opportunity to build higher performance when we're already doing repairs? And what are those options? So we've got cost benefit, materials resilience, what are the best points of intervention with advice, and those design options. And in stream two, it takes a little bit more of a social perspective. So it's looking at those decision-making processes around things like demolition and relocation and repurposing. So I will cover a little bit of what happened and what's been happening in that space as well. But really what our goal was to look at what was already out there, what were the knowledge gaps for New Zealand, what were the gaps that we at BRANZ could fill, and what were the gaps that perhaps we should be passing on to other organisations within New Zealand, because there's a lot of people working in this space. And once we identify those gaps, basically put forward future research to look at how we can actually try and answer some of these questions. So the big thing that we really found from our initial conversations before the project was even off the ground was that we really needed to be talking to the communities. It wasn't good enough to just produce the guidance. It has to be suitable, and it has to be communicated to not just the building industry, not just councils, not just government, but also the people who actually own these buildings and live in them. So we really wanted to look at how we could provide that practical guidance to get effective action around building resilience and building back better to minimise the risks. I mean, ideally, we want people to make these changes to their buildings before something happens, instead of being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff where we're spending all of our time in constant recovery mode. And in terms of impact, that's where we're looking at that behaviour shift. One of the things that we did find from talking to people was that obviously we have a lot of hazards, we have a lot of events. Unfortunately, each event is treated as its own standalone event, and often we seem to go back to the beginning instead of basically kicking into action and providing people with the relevant information. And from that, we also want a lot more considered design around how we actually manage the hazards, which of course comes down to knowing what the hazards are that are attached with each locality. And of course, often we think that focusing on the new builds is going to get the biggest bang, but as I showed you in one of the earlier slides, we have a lot of houses that are already in high-risk areas. So we really need to look at what those retrofit options are for people and actually provide that information to them. I think sometimes people make the assumption that retrofitting is going to be super expensive, but we know that there are things that people can do that are quite low cost and can benefit them with reducing their, not just reducing costs for repair, but also the impact on them from a personal perspective, because if the recovery goes smoother, you tend to find that people bounce back better. And then, of course, we have the big one that always pops up here is location, location, location. Kiwis love to live where there are awesome views, or we're close to the beaches, or we're close to lakes and rivers. And unfortunately, what we often see is that those stunning locations have much higher vulnerability to natural hazard. We're seeing it still going on with councils getting a lot of pressure, especially from developers. There's a big push to build affordable dwellings. However, a lot of the available land has risks associated with it, which may be, in the case of one of these clips, extreme flood risk. So there's a reason we haven't built there. And definitely the question of, can you really build something affordable when you have to take a lot of mitigation steps to actually make sure that those houses aren't at risk? What we are starting to see, though, is a lot of changing behaviours. And we think that the 2023 events in Auckland and Cyclone Gabrielle were really a catalyst for it. In July this year, there was a change to LIM reports. So those are Land Information Memorandum reports. So they basically talk about your property. And as of July, councils are required to put all known hazards onto property LIMs that they are aware of, so that people have a chance to actually see what might be a problem for them in the future. We're starting to see, from an insurance perspective, there's a lot more of a risk-based model being applied. And this in itself gives people, especially if they're buying a home, an idea of what kind of risks there are and whether or not they can get insurance either now or into the future. Obviously, you have your locality history and even those basic observations. I mean, you can look at those pictures and you see that there is a lot of retaining, which suggests that there may be some risk of landslide potentially associated with it. But one of the big things that happened was that the Natural Hazards Commission basically started the Natural Hazards Portal. And basically anyone can go into this portal and you can put your property into the portal. In fact, you can look across entire neighbourhoods and see claims that have been made for that property, which would be under the Natural Hazards Commission or EQC. So I think New Zealand is quite unique in that we have an almost public insurance coverage. So within your private insurance, you pay a levy to the Natural Hazards Commission. And that means that if your property is damaged by several different types of natural hazards, they contribute $300,000 towards the repair of your home and property. And then private insurance covers the rest of it. But through the Natural Hazards portal, you can actually go in by region and see what the risks are to different natural hazards across the area, across the whole country. And as I mentioned, community focus is really one of the things that we wanted to keep in mind when we were doing this work as well. So these photos were actually taken from Muriwai, which is out on the west coast of Auckland. It was probably one of the worst hit places during especially Cyclone Gabrielle, because the ground was so wet. They had some fairly significant landslides, and there were several deaths. But basically, as a byproduct of the Auckland Anniversary Cyclone Gabrielle events, the councils and central government actually combined funds to categorise properties in terms of their levels of risk. So they actually bought out those that were deemed too dangerous, that could not be made safe. And so in Muriwai, there were quite a large number of properties that were deemed too dangerous, even if they hadn't been damaged. But Auckland Council, as part of the buyback, actually went through the process of deconstructing the homes instead of just sending in diggers to demolish them. So they are trying to repurpose and reuse as much of the material from these homes as they can. So this is a little bit of the work from Oren, who's on stream 2, who's looking at the decision-making process around relocation, demolition, recycling. So what he's been doing is he's been talking to the building industry to find out about their experiences after the flooding events. But on the flip side, he's also been talking to homeowners. And as we've found, one of the big problems is there seems to be a bit of a lack of general guidance on where to actually start. You kind of think, oh, I'm going to call the insurance company and they're going to manage everything for me. As we learnt in large-scale events like Auckland Anniversary and Cyclone Gabrielle, there were tens of thousands of damaged dwellings. It took a long time for people to actually be able to get access to their insurance companies, then having to talk to the council and any number of other people along that pathway to getting their homes repaired. And of course, we're also talking about communities who have been traumatized. They've potentially lost quite a lot of their the things that they hold dear to them and hold value. And of course, as I mentioned, navigating the councils and insurance during the recovery process was really quite a challenge. I think people thought they would just be dealing with one person, and instead there was a whole stream of people. And often it was the homeowner having to do the back and forth in a space that they don't actually understand. And of course, the problem was with the buyouts were they were publicized, but it took a long time for them to actually be categorized, because it takes time to actually look at the modeling and where those high risk areas actually are. So this particular example was a homeowner who heard that Auckland Council was going to buy them out, but insurance weren't going to stop until they actually knew that that was down in black and white, really. And so obviously we have regulatory challenges. You've got the building code, you've got a whole bunch of other people involved in the space. But what some of our councils ended up doing was actually they started trying to partner with homeowners so that they could get affordable geotech risk assessments. Geotech in particular, obviously, if you're dealing with landslides, is quite important. And in some cases, people weren't able to get their insurance claims underway because they were waiting on geotechnical reports to come in before the homes could be assessed. The councils were also really proactive in providing safety information for homeowners, for example, asbestos risk, which is certainly a big one if you're going to be going in and trying to clean your home up. And then what we've really found is that there needs to be some really straightforward solutions, because there are a lot of repeated engineering assessments. They're expensive, and often there's not enough engineers to actually complete them all. So how can we really streamline that to make it an easier process, not just for the engineers, but also for those homeowners, and of course everything that falls on after that with the insurance and such. In terms of what else is happening, Oren is considering continuing with his homeowner interviews with what they need in terms of recovery after a severe event. And we've also developed a resident resource for help immediately after flooding. So it's very, very simple steps. I think there's 10 steps in it. And we've been working with the Insurance Council of New Zealand to make sure that obviously they're happy with what guidance we're providing, because the last thing we want to do is reinforce that fear that homeowners have that if they do something, their insurance company is then not going to pay out on their claims and help them get back to normal. And obviously, as Catherine mentioned, we have a research side to BRANZ, and we also have consultancy services, which is the commercial side. So we've had some interesting conversations with them just to ask whether or not there's any current appetite on the commercial side looking at resilience moving forward. Currently, not so much, unless councils specifically ask about the resilience or durability of materials to things such as flooding. The other thing that BRANZ does with the Building Research Levy is that we actually fund external research as well. So there are several projects currently going on that are being funded by BRANZ. So as you can see, we've got some flood resilience for light timber frame walls. So in New Zealand, and we know it's quite unique to us, plasterboard is used as a bracing material, which generally is absolutely fine. But as we know, plasterboard and water don't really mix particularly well. And this has created some challenges in terms of repairing homes, because homeowners can't just go in and pull the plasterboard off, because they may potentially pull off plasterboard that's actually required for the bracing capacity of their home, which is important given that we are both seismic and we also have strong winds. Massey University are also looking at that multi-hazard building strengthening, primarily because after the Canterbury earthquakes, there was a lot of work done around building strengthening, but it was very hard to get people to take up repair options when it was only for one hazard. So if there's one thing that someone can do that gives them a bit of resilience to multiple hazards, obviously that's a big benefit for them. We have quality of rebuild after flooding, especially when cash payouts are done. Earth Sciences New Zealand are looking at challenges for dwellings on slopes, especially in terms of landslide, and the University of Auckland with rising waters resilient homes. So they're really looking at, instead of the technical space, it's the thing that actually stops people taking those steps to improve resilience or working towards repair, especially from an equity side of an equity perspective, because we often see that some communities are more heavily impacted than others. In the last couple of months, we've actually just released 3 new bulletins, which are actually looking at providing guidance to the industry on building, rebuilding, repairing in hazard-prone areas. And we're also currently refreshing our repairing a home after a flood bulletin as well, which it's just gone out for review. So we're hoping that'll come out probably early next year. And our future research. So as I mentioned at the front, part of the point of our project was to really identify those gaps that still exist in New Zealand where we need to do some more focused research. And so we've put forward our rescue project. Thank you, AI, for a catchy research title. And it continues on with the work that we've already started, where we're really looking at that sort of systemic change, getting community level benefits and technical advancements. So working with the stakeholders we've already made and undertaking some experimental work. So obviously one of the things we'd really like is that when people are buying homes, that they really consider what the natural hazards are that are associated with that building instead of just falling in love with it because it's got a nice kitchen in it or a really good view. And now I'm going to do a little bit of a plug. So BRANZ was chosen as the host for the IBPC 2027, which is the International Building Physics Conference. So it's going to be held in Wellington in April 2027, estimating around 400 of the world's building experts coming into New Zealand. Obviously, probably with a few tours of BRANZ along the way as well. So if you're interested at all, Catherine is actually involved in the organising side of things. So there's some questions there. But really one of the things that is most important to us is collaboration. We're such a small organisation that we can't achieve any real impact if we don't collaborate with others who are playing in the same space as us. So it's what we do, and obviously if we can collaborate internationally as well with people who are already working in the space who may already have learnings that could benefit, then we're really happy to do that. And that draws to the end.
Oh, thank you so much, Catherine and Katie, for that insightful presentation. We can take any questions, suggestions, or rather a discussion now, if there is any. Okay. So until the audience warm up, probably I'll ask some questions. I'll start with the location. You mentioned you have a very specific location in your institute in a rural area, as you mentioned. Is there any specific reason for selecting that location, or just random?
The story behind BRANZ's location is that it had been zoned to be an industrial area. Everyone expected that there was going to be a whole lot of development out there. BRANZ was the first one out to build all our site and equipment, and no one else followed. So we're now surrounded by lifestyle blocks.
Really?
A lot of rural. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's nice when you get to go outside and see a whole bunch of wildlife pottering around.
Hopefully we'll be busy in future. Yeah, and then you shared a very nice photo of your fire testing, the lab facility. So do you outsource that to other researchers like the universities, the other companies also? Or is it just limited to BRANZ research testing?
So no. So we've got the research side and we've got the commercial side. So obviously, both of those at BRANZ use the facilities, but we will get a lot of commercial testing from outside organisations coming in to use it. We'll get other researchers, for example, University of Canterbury have a fire engineering department, so we'll have lots of people associated with that coming up and doing tests, and we have students who might be doing PhDs or MScs who need some experiments carried out there. So we are open to all. It's the main limitation really is around timing of things. So that can be a bit of a limiting factor, just being able to squeeze everybody in. But yeah, no, we're very much open to having conversations with whoever wants to use the facility.
That's great to hear. Why I ask is that we also have like fire safety and engineering program, and our students sometimes find it hard to find good testing facilities
Right.
since much is not available within the
Right.
university. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, definitely have a chat to us.
Okay. Buddhini, I can see your hand is raised. You can go ahead. You can unmute your mic and this. We can continue this as a friendly conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you very much, Catherine, for this very, very interesting presentation. I was quite keen because the research I have conducted so far now have focused on 5 different countries and how they are rebuilding after disasters, and building materials become one of the main issues when we are rebuilding after disasters. So to me, hearing that even very popular areas in New Zealand is under risk of natural disasters, it gives me goosebumps, because quite recently we're talking when part of Asia has gone underwater and many lives have taken by it. I come from Sri Lanka, and in my country now more than 300 lives have been taken due to flood and landslide, which is unbelievable. And so one of the things that my research has disclosed is that building materials become quite an important, and also mainly there's a lack of building materials when you try to rebuild after disasters, and there's a shortage of materials, and it leads to many other problems like price increases and so on, and also material compromise, and where DRR get affected and all that. Another interesting thing that I found recently is that during rebuilding after disasters in many countries, even though there are alternative materials available, people, that means the community, and as well as the practitioners involved in rebuilding after disasters, are reluctant to use those new materials, which sometimes have better resilient qualities and properties to withstand future disasters that people may face. So I'm just interested to find out whether this is something that get disclosed in the research that you do, or have you heard of something like that? Because the situation in New Zealand may be different to what I have experienced in other countries. So I'm just curious to know whether there's anything about acceptance of disaster resilience materials that you encounter.
One of the things that we found in terms of the recovery space after these events is that what's actually held people back in some cases is the insurance space. So the insurance policies are like for like. So there have been some challenges for people in the past with actually changing the materials that they're using, or trying to upgrade their homes so that they are more resilient. But we're starting to hear from the insurance space that they want this to happen. They want there to be more resilience. They don't necessarily want to pay for it, but they will support those changes going forward. I guess we've been looking at Australia and the work that's going on there in terms of insurance companies providing discounts on premiums if people take more resilient measures. And it's kind of like, well, Australia is just across the ditch from us. So it would be really nice to see that happening in our space as well. The language that we're getting a lot of is they're looking at repairability. So you kind of have to think that that means you have to use more resilient materials if you want to be able to repair those buildings easier and faster, and ideally more cheaply as well, so that you're not going through the same expenses over and over again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that experience that you shared. Insurance can be the way forward, because in the countries that I did my research, insurance doesn't play a huge role. So it's the mere community. Maybe they were scared to accept new materials, and maybe the practitioners weren't properly educated about the new materials. So eventually, the people have not been able to use new materials in construction. But as you said, yes, insurance may be a very good point to promote these new materials. Thank you very much for sharing that experience here.
Thank you, Buddhini, for asking that interesting question. Yashoda, you would like to?
As my research is also like focused on flood insurance and resilience, I'm really interested about what is your are you doing any research related to insurance industry with them? I'm curious about what they want actually, insurance industry. Are you doing anything related to those things
I
currently?
think that's actually one of the hopes for if we get the funding for our next phase of research. So we're meant to find out hopefully on Friday if we've been given the tick. But we've actually we're just in the process of finalizing a survey that we want to go out not just to those in the building industry, but also insurance. I'm not sure what it's like in Australia, but we have found that sometimes engaging with insurance can be a little bit challenging. So we're in the process of building that relationship up. And hopefully with the Insurance Council of New Zealand, they're very open to trying to improve things in this space, especially since ideally we don't want people to lose the ability to have insurance or have it so expensive that they just can't afford it anymore.
Yeah.
In Australia also there are at national level there are hazard insurance partnership. I think you may have heard about that. At national level, the government and the Insurance Council of Australia is collaborating about building such the portals, like the one you mentioned, the claims hazard portal, that kind of portal. The NIMA is going to build up such kind of thing. So let's see.
Yeah, I think you're much further ahead in that space than we are. And it would definitely be good to have some more conversations around that actually with you. Katie and I were at the Australian Disaster Resilience Conference in Perth at the end of August.
Next year?
AIDR, yeah. We were talking to some people there, and it was, I guess, a little reassuring to hear that, how far that they've advanced now with collaborating with the insurance industry. But it's taken them, 10, 15 years to get to that stage. So it's a long kind of process of engagement. And as Katie says, we've traditionally found that a very difficult sector to interact with in terms of the building industry, but we are starting to see some inroads. We are making some inroads there, and we're just trying to push that because we do see them as a really key leverage point for a lot of this.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I can understand the situation. Currently, I participated one of the conference of Insurance Council of Australia. They helped me to interact with some people. Otherwise, for me also, it is so hard to interact with the people in the industry.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. And we have Olufisayo.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Kathy. I really want to thank you for your presentation. My question, you've addressed it a little bit, but I just wanted more clarification. So, to give you a bit of a context, in 2012, shortly after 2011 Christchurch earthquake, I wanted to come to New Zealand to do my PhD in disaster management with the University of Auckland. But along the line, it didn't work out, so I ended up doing it at the University of Newcastle in Australia. So I have a PhD in disaster management. So, but talking about the issue of collaboration you talked about, because 3 days ago, I heard about BRANZ by Professor Monty, who shared insight about the grants they won. So, and you coming again today to talk about what BRANZ is doing, and you mentioned about the issue of collaboration. So I just wanted you to give more clarification. That kind of collaboration that you are talking about, is it that potential or interested researcher can join your existing group, or whoever is interested can form their own research group and link up with you? Then what is the point of contact? Who should we talk to? Who should we meet as the first point of contact when we want to collaborate with you? So I would like if you can share more clarification about that.
Do you mean in this resilience area specifically?
Yes.
Yeah, us directly. So yeah, just contact us directly. I think Katy put our contact details up on the last slide. So more than happy to just have a conversation directly with you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine, for that. It's 7:03, but let me ask one question because I was so interested to, listen to what you did regarding the community involvement. So when you know, choose the communities, how did you select them based on the communities who are recently hit by disasters? Currently or in the past? How did you choose those communities for your research?
A lot of them actually came from internal contacts.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we've tended to find that because of the amount of research that's going on in the space, there's certainly fatigue in some of those communities from the number of researchers who have been wanting to talk to them. So we weren't too specific. It was sort of a case of, have you been impacted by a natural hazard event? Are you interested in talking to us? And so we actually put that out on our social media platforms. So it was LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook were those three. And then just touching base with people was actually sort of how some of them came about. So Oren is still collecting more people. Most of them are in the flood space, though, because obviously that's the most recent event that we've had. The Canterbury earthquake was 2011, so that's a little way back. But we do know that there are still claims ongoing in that space. So even this far after the earthquake, everything is not completely back to normal for some people.
Yeah, that was my other question that I wanted to ask, from the multi-hazard perspective, is there any specific disaster that you're focusing on now? Apparently, it seems to be the flooding.
Yeah, so it's primarily flooding at the moment. BRANZ has historically played quite a large role in the seismic space. So we had guidelines that were developed after the Canterbury earthquake, which are generally used quite widely across New Zealand now, and by a lot of the engineering organisations. It just happens that flood is the current one. Although interestingly, so flooding has historically been the event that's actually cost the most from an insurance perspective, especially when you sort of remove those large scale earthquakes. After the 2023 events, landslide actually overtook flooding as the most expensive insurance payout.
Yeah.
So that was a big change for us.
Yeah. And most of the time they go hand in hand, like the landslides and the floods. Okay, it's 7:06. I think I should let you go. I think we had a very interactive session. And so before I conclude, let me actually quickly introduce you our upcoming seminar. Let me share the slides back again. Yep. Yep. So this is one of the seminars of our seminar series, and our next seminar is on rebuilding right, professionalism and ethics at Miss Post Disaster Chaos by Dr. Buddhini Basinger. Buddhini is still around. Oh yes, she's here.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Thanks, Buddhini. And this will be in February, and we will be sending out emails with more details. And so feel free to pass on these webinar details to anyone. And also, we also would like to hear from you any interesting topics so that we can organize them into a webinar or a seminar in future. With that, I would like to conclude the session today, and I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our speakers, Dr. Catherine Nicholson and Dr. Katy Stokes. Thank you so much for your time and effort for coming along and presenting for us, and all participants, both members, non-members, and Yashoda Kalutotege for our communications coordinator, as well as Temi Egbelakin, for leading this commission as the senior leader. So thank you for being part of this important conversation, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. Thank you so much, and have a good evening, good morning, or good afternoon.